Welcome back to the Healing Narratives of Suicide Grief. We have a new name. We're now Suicide Grief at the end, just so people can find us. I'm Sue. I'm a psychologist and EMDR trauma therapist, and I lost my brother to suicide in 2015, and we are here on the Suicide Healing Narratives in order to help other people find hope and compassion and love wherever you are. If you've been touched by suicide, I'm glad you found us, because we're here just to share our stories to help everyone out there. We're sorry you're here. We all recognise, once you get into this club, you don't want to be here, but you're glad the club's here. So this is one of those areas, one of these communities where survivors of suicide loss come together and share their stories of hope, love and commitment to show that we're still standing. And you can too. Listen with care to these podcasts. This is season 2, so we're going to have more and more coming out, which I'm really pleased about, because I've had a bit of a break and I want to share why I had that break today. But please listen with care. If you're new, welcome. Look after yourself listening to these stories. If someone's recommended them to you, which sometimes happens, because you've lost someone to suicide, just come with a compassionate eye to yourself. You can always stop halfway through. You don't have to listen to the whole story. Tune into yourself and what you feel is right for you. I deliberately choose people to come on the podcast with different experiences of suicide loss, whether they've lost a husband, a son, a daughter, a mother, a father, an uncle, to show that we're all affected. The ripple effect of suicide is big, but we're all here still standing, and hopefully give you some ideas of how you can heal too. This podcast, like I say, is about anticipatory grief. It's about my journey over the last couple of years and why I had the break. I started the podcast in 2021. Nobody grieves the same, but I started it, and we had 37 stories. 37 people came on and shared their stories, and then I kind of had to take a break for my own personal reasons. In September 2022. So we haven't had an episode since September 2022. And I'm sorry about that. But hopefully after today, you'll understand why I've come away completely from social media. And I want to talk about that as well. When a lot of us go into suicide support after losing someone to suicide, we go into this area to help other people, and it's healing for ourselves, healing for everybody else. And I've talked a lot about that before in the last season, how it felt for me like I needed to do something with this. I couldn't just grieve. It didn't feel, it was too big, it felt too massive. So I kind of went on this whole journey of running the London Marathon and doing the podcast and doing my doctoral research on suicide loss and supporting other people with suicide grief. And I kind of had to do something, but I've been on my own healing journey through that by helping other people. And what life has shown me over the last couple of years is we all have to take our break from that in our own space, in our own time, when we feel we need to, because it's not an easy topic to continually work with. That was made 10 times worse for me because my son, who's 21 now, has been suicidal since he was 11. Haven't talked about him a lot on the podcast because he's here, he's alive, bless his heart, and thank goodness. But he has been suicidal and making suicide attempts for the past 10 years, and I wanted to talk about that today. And I haven't talked about it before because of his privacy, but I've spoken to him a lot recently, and he said he wants me to start sharing some of my experience of that, not his, but mine, and how as a mother supporting him has been. And this is how it links to anticipatory grief for me. So, quick recap: my brother died in 2015. My mum died 2 years before that. She died of something called Pick's disease, a horrible disease which took her life over a slow period. Well, quick actually. From diagnosis to death, it was a couple of years. And she was only 63 when she died. So I kind of did some anticipatory grief there. What anticipatory grief is, the definition is to grieve before a loss. It's a painful sorrow. It's the grieving process before the loss. So it can either prepare you for losing somebody, like it did with my mum. I kind of said my goodbyes to her before she died. So it made the grieving process, the mourning process for me easier than it might have been if I hadn't said my goodbyes. Um, and this is what anticipatory grief is. It can either be helpful like that, or it can make things more prolonged, more difficult. I relate this to how I felt with supporting my son for the last 10 years, because I've been grieving for him, because every year since he was 11, we've been in a horrendous place where he has been attempting suicide, actively attempting suicide, and we as a family have had to support him through that. And I wouldn't have done anything other than that, try and support him through that. It's been a very important part of my journey with him. But I really feel that I had anticipatory grief in these past 10 years, but he's still here. So it's a very confusing place to be in, to be honest. And I want to share about that here for anybody else who's supporting somebody suicidal or supported somebody who is suicidal, to understand more of the processes involved with that. Because I relate it a lot to anticipatory grief, which is you're preparing yourself to lose that person. It can be a real roller coaster. It felt like that for me. It was, I shifted back and forward between distress and you can't do this, I don't want you to do this can't happen, please don't, and trying to really just desperately stop the situation and clinging on to hope that something could help, clinging on all the time to maybe if he gets therapy, maybe if he has medication, maybe if I do something different, maybe if everyone does something different, maybe if we fix the situation, it can help. If I switched from that to moments of absolute grief that I don't think I can do anything about this, I have to kind of let him go, which is a horrible, horrible, horrible place to be as a mother. And it's that complete roller coaster then to letting him go, wanting to keep him here, letting him go, wanting to keep him here, which is so confusing with suicide. It's not the same as him having an illness in the standard sense, and there was nothing I could do about it. It felt like there was something we could do about it. The whole suicide prevention movement, which is a very valid one, is that we can prevent suicide. And yes, it's a behaviour, and anybody who's been at that rock bottom place, who's come out of the other side, fantastic, wonderful, beautiful. And I've watched him coming in and out of these stages, but going to complete helplessness. And that to me has been an absolute illness, but it didn't feel the same as my mother. My mother had an illness nobody could control other than what the doctor said we could do about it in terms of medication. With my son, it really felt like there was this complete, what can I do to help all the time, this constant pull to do something to help. And I had to manage that as well as do my other work. Hence, I needed to come away from the topic and do my own healing around that and what I've been through with my son. Anticipatory grief is more proactive. So you kind of rehearse losing your loved one. And that's why it can be helpful, because you can rehearse losing them before they go. So there's a less of a shock. I found one study on how anticipatory grief links to supporting somebody suicidal. And it researched people that have lost someone to suicide and did it minimize the shock. And it said it minimized the shock, but there was still just as much shock. So in one sense, it minimized it. On the other hand, they still felt it. And this is the confusing aspect of it. I know I've spoken to a lot of people who've been there while their loved one is suicidal, and then they have lost them to suicide. And I've heard how that has impacted them in terms of they felt like they were kind of ready, like they knew it was going to happen to some degree, but they were desperately trying to stop it happen. But then when it did happen, it was still just as much of a shock, still just as much of a really a surrealness of this as has this actually happened. So everyone is so different, and it just highlights the complexity all the time to me of suicide and the whole dynamics in the family. I've spent on and off over the last 10 years times when I was on 24/7 alert with my son constantly, not quite sure what was going to happen next. It wasn't my life. I couldn't switch off at all. I couldn't go to bed at night and switch my phone off. There was always just the constant, will I be woken up by the phone tonight and have to go to A&E and sit for hours and wait to get some help, which ultimately never worked. because we'd be in the same position the next day. That's why I said it never worked, because we kept being in the same position the next day for days and days and days. Having the ambulance, police come in looking for him when he went missing. All of that we've been through as a family. And it felt like it feels like anticipatory grief because I lost control of my own emotions, intense sadness, tearfulness, this real rehearsal, proactive rehearsal of what will I do if I find him? What will happen if? What will happen if? Because I kept having to rehearse that because it was a reality in our everyday life for a long time. And this is how basically anticipatory grief, you get the same symptoms as grief. So anger, irritability, fear, loneliness, isolation, anxiety, guilt, intense preoccupation with the person, like I've said, the rehearsal of the death. You know, it's very similar to that you get when you're grieving for somebody. The loneliness and isolation, fear, the anger, the intense feelings that overwhelm you like waves. But that's the difference. Grief is reactive. So you can be sitting and suddenly a wave will come over you while you're making a cup of tea. Suddenly a wave will come over you of sadness. With anticipatory grief, it's more of a rehearsal. So it's a proactive rehearsal of what will happen if I lose him. So anticipatory grief can prolong things. And again, this is something very relative to suicide loss, I think. Supporting somebody for years and years and years, and then they do die by suicide, is different to when it suddenly happens out of the blue. Neither's okay, neither's right, neither's horrendous. You know, both are horrendous, sorry. It's all awful in its own way, and this is the complexity. But if you're supporting somebody who's suicidal, like I have been with my son, I just want to say there's hope. You know, I've done a lot of healing over this in my own way. I'm going to share a little bit about that. Because we can do things to help ourselves with anticipatory grief. We can confront them. We can confront our fears. We can speak to friends and family or therapists, whatever you need to do to confront the fears. Don't try and avoid them. They're real. Don't try and push them down. They're real. They exist in the everyday life of helping somebody who's suicidal. You are kind of preparing yourself, but then you're not. You are, then you're not. So don't try and deny that. It's a scary place to be in. Clarify and any other misunderstandings with the person. Express how you feel because you don't know what's going to happen. It's very difficult to say our goodbyes. With my mum, I could say my goodbye. It felt very much a helpful thing to do. Doing that with my son was a completely different thing. Saying goodbye to him when all I could try and say to him was, have hope, you'll be okay. Things will change tomorrow. Everything could get better. You know, hang on in there. I couldn't say my goodbyes, which is why it's so complicated. And I didn't want to make preparations for life without him either, because every part of me, every part of my mother wanted him to stay and be okay and be healthy and be fit. And you know, that normally anticipatory grief, that's what happens. We make preparations. I made preparations for my mum. I helped the rest of the family deal with it. We talked to my dad about where he'd live and things like that. We were proactive in making preparations for when my mum had passed away. I couldn't do that with my son. I didn't even tell anybody what he was going through in the early years because of the shame and this taboo and the stigma, and that everyone at the school gates, their kids seemed fine. Why was mine not even attending school? Why was he struggling so much? And I remember coming home from school one day after dropping my other children off, and I got back to the house and I stopped the car and I looked up to his bedroom where he was inside, and I thought, and I heard myself very internally say he should be at school. You know, he was about 12 at the time. And then I heard my inner voice say that. And then I reassured myself that he shouldn't be anywhere other than where he is. He should be at home, should be loved, looked after, cared for, because he's not well, because he can't be well to be wanting to do this all the time. And that's what I had to constantly remind myself of, that this is his life. I'm here to support him, love him, care for him, do everything I possibly can. But it's still his life to live. And I've had some really honest, frank conversations with him about that. I want him to live because he wants to live, not because he wants to live for anybody else. It's been such a difficult conversations to have, but being honest and open with him, for me, has been the best way forward. It's not been simple to do that at all. But holding my breath until the real pain started didn't feel like even an option. And this is one of the advice we give in anticipatory grief. Don't just hold on, waiting for it to hit. Sort of deal with it as you're going through it. As you're feeling things, observe them, be present, hold yourself, be compassionate, get support, love yourself, because it's not easy going through anticipatory grief or real grief. Both is so difficult to go through, but possible to. Don't hold on until the real pain begins. Work through it as you go through. Get help, get support. That's the idea with anticipatory grief, standard anticipatory grief, and it's also the case with the kind of grief I've been experiencing. Get help, get support, love yourself, because it's not an easy thing to do. Support somebody who's suicidal. It's a difficult thing to talk about. So I've come to record this podcast quite a few times, and I've tried, and it hasn't quite gone well. So I'm hoping this one does, because it's a very emotional thing to me to talk about. But I want to say I'm okay. I really do. I want to say I'm okay. I've taken the last 2 years to heal from some of this. I've had some amazing experiences with sound healing. I've done a sound healing course, and I've lied, and I've said to the gong, heal my womb, heal my womb from this feeling that I've given birth to my child who struggles with living here, because of his mental health, finds it very difficult living here. And I've asked the gong to heal that. And I felt lighter ever since. I've gone traveling, done a lot of traveling, and I've had my own EMDR, and I've been in community a lot. And this is why I had to kind of stop the podcast and take a break and look after myself, because it was one thing kind of losing my mum and then losing my brother to suicide. It was another kind of supporting my son through his mental health. And the journey goes on with that every single day. I thank everything I possibly can that he's still here and he's okay today, because I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So I can only be grateful for today. I can only thank today. And I think I've said this before a lot on the podcast, nothing can be as bad as the bad times, nothing could be as bad as hearing my brother had died by suicide. Nothing, so anything else can be, there's got to be easier, nothing can be as bad as the conversations I've had with my son or watching him struggle. I keep thinking it can't get that bad ever again. And then, you're back round to something happens. And I've just recognized how much self-care I need to take of myself during that process. So doing the sound baths has helped. I learned to ride a motorbike. That helped. Wanted to do it forever. So I took some time out and learned to ride a motorbike. And that taught me a lot about my nervous system in general. Then I realized, I've really come to make friends with my nervous system. My nervous system is a fascinating, wonderful machine. There's this whole idea that the nervous system is about fight, flight. It's reactive. It's difficult to manage. But even in trauma and all the trauma I've experienced, I believe my nervous system is there to help me and support me. If I dropped a knife on my foot, I'd want to get it out of the way. If a car was coming towards me on the road, I'd want to jump out of the way. That's my nervous system looking after me. That's my fight or flight system looking after me. So I've come to love my nervous system and thank it. Thank it for times like this when I find it difficult to talk about something. That it's looking after me. It's giving me adrenaline. It's giving me cortisol to get me through. It's also learning to say to it as well, you don't need to help me right now. I'm good, thanks. I'm a capable, strong woman, and I can cope with this. So even when those times get really relentless and you feel like it's never going to end, have hope, because I'm at this point in my life now where I've got 4 teenagers. Well, I did have 4 teenagers. Now there's two, and my older two are 21 and 23, and my younger ones are 18 and 19. And I'm at the point in my life where I can start to do things for me. And I went to Bali for 3 months at the beginning of January, and I never thought in a million years I'd be able to do that. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, supporting all of my children, not just my son, who's been struggling so much. I took the time out for me, and I took 3 months traveling, and I moved around every 3 days, and I saw the world, and I did all that on my own. And I wasn't meant to go on my own. I was meant to go with my partner, but that's another story. Anyway, I ended up on my own with only myself to be responsible for, and I learned so much about myself during that process. And I did a lot of healing during that process. I lied in a pyramid with gongs playing to me. I learned to surf. So I did surfing, and again, that's another extreme kind of like, why am I doing this? And it was beautiful and wonderful to be with the waves, to observe the waves, to fall off and get back up again, to fall off and get back up again, just like on my motorbike. To learn that my nervous system is there to look after me, and it can heal. We have an adaptive system that can heal. And I wanted to share my story to show that I haven't got any magical answers. Can't tell you how to um, handle yourself or your situation. I can just tell you what I did, and that was to keep coming back to myself, keep reassuring myself that I'm doing the best I can. Because when we're helping somebody that's suicidal, the helplessness we can sometimes feel is really strong. I just kept reminding myself, I'm doing all I can. This is his life, but I'm doing all I can. And checking in with that. Am I doing everything I can? If I am, then reassuring myself, I can't, maybe today I can't fix this. I've tried my best. I've done everything I possibly can, but today maybe I just need to look after me and do what I need to do. And I can't believe for a second I would be able to take 3 months off, but everything was sorted at home. Everything was looked after. I went and I found me again. And I really needed to do that and take that time away from the suicide topic. And yeah, but now I'm back, and I'm really excited to be back because I took that time off. I'm back and wanting to do the podcast again. And I've been asked to write a book on suicide. So I'm talking to people about that at the moment, how that's going to pan out. And I'm going to start running retreats for other people to heal their body through sound and through singing. I also did a lot of singing through EMDR. I do a lot of work now with people with EMDR, healing the traumatic aspect of grief. There's grief and there's trauma. Trauma can block the grief. It can stop the natural grieving process to happen. Grief and mourning is a completely natural thing to happen. It's kind of something we have to go through if we love somebody. Trauma can block that. And what I love about EMDR and working with people with EMDR is if we take away that trauma, then the natural grieving process can happen. And I'm passionate about doing that. So I'm going to start, my first retreat is next spring in the UK, where we come together as suicide loss survivors and we do group EMDR. We help heal our trauma, and we have community and community singing, dancing, exploration, nature, to help heal and come together as a part of this journey that we're on, where we continually, healing is a continual journey, it's a path. But also to keep saying I'm on a healing journey is a bit like, well, are you ever going to finish? And it's like, no, I'm never going to finish, because every day something will probably happen that might activate me, that might remind me of what happened with my son. I thought I'd done so much work, and then I went on a singing retreat, and suddenly the sound allowed me to feel and release and let go. And was another wonderful opportunity to feel, because I think in life we're told not to feel, stay quiet, stay small. And the permission to feel, I feel I get through sound, and I want to integrate that into the retreats and give people permission to feel. So keep hope, share your feelings openly, prepare for whatever might happen. whilst in the background having hope that things can change. They change all the time, minute to minute. And that can be hard to manage, but not if you keep reminding yourself that that's part of life and it's okay. It's okay to feel how you feel and manage that the best way that you can. You know your loved one. That's as much as you need to know. Tune in and listen to that part of you. And that's how I got through, by to keep reminding myself, I know my son better than any other medical professional, anybody else. I know what's happening and I can do my best in this situation, but I can't necessarily fix it, which is a big, hard thing for me as a mother to let go of. As soon as I seemed to let go of that, though, things shifted, things changed. I was able then to give myself permission to have some days off, to not be on 24/7 alert. And I think that gave my son space to breathe a little bit. Yeah. But who knows what would have happened if I'd done anything different? I don't know. I've just done my thing, my journey, my way. Keep in mind, with any kind of anticipatory grief, that you don't have to stop loving the person that you're losing. That's not part of grieving. And it's not part of grieving before or after. We can continue to love. And that can be so difficult when we feel like we need to let go of them somehow, but we need to continue those bonds. We can continue those bonds whilst loving them, whether it's anticipatory or it's actual grief. We can continue the bonds, and it's important too. And yeah, I heard a great quote, and I'm going to read it to you about anticipatory grief. It says an anonymous person who wrote this, again because of the shame and stigma around supporting her children who are suicidal. But she said, the anticipatory grief and related emotions are preparing me so that acceptance will be easier, and so that it does not in fact destroy me, and so that I can survive. Nature is clever and is already preparing me for my own survival. I live desperately hoping that the only grief I will ever experience in relation to this is anticipatory and nothing more. I want to leave you with that, with the hope that you are being looked after. You can look after yourself. You have to look after yourself and find your community, find your space to breathe, reconnect with nature. Find a sound bath if you can, locally to you. Lie down, set the intention, sound heal me. Let whatever it is run through me. Because basically we're vibration and sound is vibration. And it channels the sound through our body to enable us to re-establish our basis, our base. Find a sound bath. Get support. Do what you need to do in your own way. Journal. We talk about this a lot on the podcast. Most people end up journaling. Journaling, write it down, everything you're going through. And I will be back with another story soon. Please like and share this podcast, because it will get out to more people if you follow, like, and do those things you need to do to help it be followed, and it will then be found by other people. And please remember, this is my new tagline for the podcast. We see you, we get you, we understand you. You're not alone, and you're not broken, because we are stronger together.